Hey, did I meet you before?
Avatar made a big splash when it hit screens in late 2009, and Ubisoft Massive is aiming to continue the momentum of its sequel, The Way of Water, with the new open-world action-adventure game Frontiers of Pandora, a clear showcase for both PC hardware and Ubisoft's own Snowdrop engine. The game is already proving to be both a visual treat and rather demanding to run, so let's open Pandora's box and see what happens.
Is it safe?
I am not sending you to your doom. Go on. Trust me, my Yanto.
Ubisoft Massive Snowdrop engine was a big hit back in 2013 with its impressive E3 demo for The Division. Although that game never quite hit those heights, it was a technical pioneer on the 8th gen consoles and PC, offering a full time of day, dynamic, pre-computed irradiance, dynamic weather, dense volumetrics, complex AI, and online integration. Snowdrop has evolved over the years, and although many of these core elements have remained, the team has embraced the current generation with new features as well. The current big ticket item is ray tracing, which is now included in the toolkit. Supporting ray trace global illumination and reflections is a core pillar for the game's visual requirements, delivering balanced lighting with diffuse colour, which is critical to the art aesthetic of the Avatar movies and game. The solution enables light to react inside caves, across flowing flora fields, and into dense wooded overgrowth, giving the game a striking and organic look. This is backed up by the game's shifting time and weather patterns, which rely on volumetrics, be they clouds, light, or fog. It adds depth and solidity to the world of Pandora. Some sections can see you wading through heavy fog during battle, or flying high through the clouds as the stratospheric water volumes engulf your steed, not unlike Horizon Forbidden West. Good company indeed. This is where my first critique arises from a visual perspective. The movement of flora and fauna, combined with the stylized lighting, fog volumes, ray trace global illumination, and recessed shadows and occlusion, and the sheer micro density of the world, is staggeringly impressive. Even on medium settings, the recreation of the movie's landscape with relatively minimal level of detail pop-in is worthy of much praise. However, glass or partially opaque reflective surfaces rely on projected cube maps, which fail to deliver the quality of those real-time reflections. Compounding this further, many of the water bodies that use ray trace reflections also fall back to screen space reflections, which the team have tried to hide swapping between them at certain vectors. This can aid the wiping of reflected objects at times, but not always, and it can cause other issues, namely instability, as reflections can flick on and off from a screen space object to a lower polygon proxy within that bounding volume hierarchy structure. Impacting this further is that BVH data proxy only contains static models, and all dynamic objects such as particles and characters are only reflected with SSR, so these fade out and break up due to the low resolution quality of this reflection pass. The main issue I have is with the character rendering, and materials and animation are not of the same quality as the world. It can be jarring when you battle or talk to the characters in the game. This is impacted by the stop-start nature of the real-time cinematics, as they often commence with a fade to black. I enjoy the fact that they almost always remain in first person, but the shadows, physically based rendering quality on skin and hair, and a lack of real expressive emotion can be mixed depending on the scene or character. Humans fare worse. Even if they are not seen often, it still stands out. But the Navi can also be of a mixed motion and quality level, and compounded by that first person view and spline based locomotion during many of these sequences, they can lose some of the cinematic impact the game is aspiring to. Nothing here is terrible, and often flows and feels like a Far Cry game, specifically Far Cry Primal, even if those were built with the Dunia engine. Ultimately, you spend much of your time alone, enjoying the gorgeous, dense, and above all dynamic world that can be broken down, traversed, and flown above freely. I just hoped that the mix of story and gameplay would be far more symbiotic than it is, with many NPCs simply repeating the same cycle of animations and actions with little or no regard for ongoing crises. Memory demands are high, with 8GB and even 10GB cards struggling with low bitmaps, and even on my 16GB RX 6800, some of the textures and materials in the world were low fidelity and definition, adding to some weaker moments during play.
I've not seen your kind before. What clan are you?
They look odd.
Adua invited me here.
The PC version offers excellent scalability with a preset of low through ultra, and a myriad of options to tweak within. Ray trace reflections and global illumination are integral, as even on consoles these are a core element, yes, even on the Series S. Now, scaling options are paramount if you want 60 FPS levels of performance, even on an RTX 3080 with a 5800X 3D. With DLSS enabled and a locked 60 is still not an easy feat to achieve. Using my RX 6800 and 5600X at 4K Ultra settings with a dense view and high rendering load, we can see Ultra to High nets you 41% performance increase. Knocking down to Medium delivers a further 12% on that, and with Low offering a small but possibly meaningful 6% increase over that. Image quality has three options: the core TAA of the engine, Nvidia's DLSS if you have an Nvidia GPU, and AMD's wider supported FSR3. These are vital to deliver good performance, and by enabling 4K balanced at those same high settings at 4K, we gain superior performance and image quality over low, giving us approximately 56% increase on that previous 31 FPS reading, which is still insufficient for a locked 60 FPS, but a smooth 30 or 40 FPS would be possible. As a minimum, the medium preset is as low as I recommend, with the impact to visual quality versus performance too destructive to the game's presentation. Between DLSS and FSR, the cost for the two solutions is comparable on the same hardware, which is true on my RTX 2070 and RTX 3080. The AMD solution is cross-vendor, so even if you have an older card, FSR3 is the best option for all. Now, this was a surprise for me, as it is the first game I have tested where FSR3 has a slightly better overall image quality than DLSS. This is the latest version of FSR3, and the improvements are obvious once you enable it over prior FSR versions, and this is largely down to the increased ghosting on high contrast pixels that DLSS suffers from over FSR3, as you can see in the video examples, but also more pixel jittering on average than FSR. It's not overwhelming, and certainly not something I would say stands out everywhere, but normally the foliage and instability of FSR is worse than the DLSS option, but not so here, with the trade-off being weighted in FSR3's favour. But your mileage may vary. One final choice is the use of frame interpolation that both offer, which can double performance over the base target. Both disable VSync by default, so reliance on VRR or G-Sync is required, which will limit its reach. That said, the solution requires the game to render 3 frames minimum ahead of display, e.g. frames 1 and 3 are rendered before frame 2, as this frame is generated from the interpolated delta between them. As such, a minimum or close to 16 millisecond frame time is required due to the increased input latency. With a mouse and keyboard, this is a problem, and it can present some visual artifacts such as underwater or in fast pixel movement. As such, for slow moving camera presentation, as you see in this video, it's an excellent solution to improve fluidity, but in general gameplay the benefits offered can be mixed. For mouse and keyboard it's not something I would recommend, but for controllers it could be an option so long as you can hit 60 FPS without it. And now we cover just how to get the best balance from the 3 hardware configurations that reflect the market. Starting with the medium specification of my RTX 2070, you can see the specifications of all 3 machines on screen. A locked 60 FPS is not really an option, as the visual and resolution cutbacks impact the game quite heavily. which means for this specification and below, I recommend a 30 or 40 FPS cap if you have a 120Hz capable screen or a VRR one. With a mix of medium and a few high settings, you can see my PC spec optimized table on screen at the moment at a 1440p output via FSR3 or DLSS balanced. This renders approximately 1488 by 837 base resolution, with a bias set to enable up to around 1080p scaling factor. We can achieve a consistent 30 to 40 FPS readout across dense forest, real-time cutscenes, and sky-high escapades. This provides most of the visual quality and certainly the most stable and consistent performance rate on this hardware specification. Moving up to my RX 6800 and RTX 3080, they're not really that far apart, and they present the high end of the PC market. My recommended settings for a smooth 60 FPS target present a slight mix of medium and high. Again, see my high PC spec optimized table on screen, with more weight to high on lighting, density and shadows, which can provide more than 17% increase over those base high settings with negligible visual impact. The 5600X CPU has a lower view range than my 5800X 3D, which helps reduce pop-in slightly, but the RX 6800 targets an 1800p FSR3 performance output, whilst my RTX 3080 can do the same at 4K balanced, again with a bias up to around 1620. This can still have dips below 60 in certain segments such as streaming, dense foliage and larger explosions, which is true of all my tested machines, but in general play it feels very smooth and above all solid on a mouse or controller input, which is vital for a first-person shooter.
Take it easy, Fury. You'll wear yourself out.
Loading is actually quite slow for a brand new title, taking upwards of around 8 to 10 seconds at certain points and sometimes longer depending on the speed of your CPU and SSD. Beyond these GPU levels, I would recommend scaling resolution to the FSR or DLSS 4K Ultra quality without touching my recommended settings, and once you can hit that, then a hidden unobtanium film reference setting can be enabled from the command options within the Ubisoft launcher. Of note, these are really a refinement or maximum precision ramp up of those ultra settings. What we see is far higher rate counts, pixel sampling, increased shadow cascade, level of detail, and the demands to hit 4K 60 natively require a GPU beyond anything available today. But I am very happy the team have included them as a future-proof option, and I'm sure it may become a future game to test GPU scaling come the next round of GPU generations. As a late launch this year, it points to the team aiming for the most stable release within the schedule. Although not the worst we have seen this year by far, I did find many consistent bugs throughout my play even after launch patches dropped. Objects would often pop in and out of existence, flickering and dithered LODs, light maps, and even NPCs could appear and disappear instantly. The game crashed to desktop a few times on my RTX 2070, which is likely a memory related issue, but the error trap was non-operational and was simply a hung application. But worse was the gameplay issues that came up. Characters would face the wrong way during dialogue, physics, although good, could flick and jump around at times, AI would lock into poses or simply warp around during battles or into animation sets with little to no blending, and I had a few quest break-in sections, such as connecting to your beast. If you take too long, as advised in the game, you can never mount it and you get flung to your death and fall through the map. In the end, I had to rush this section rather than be slow, as it appears to time out on the fade to black cutscene trigger, something that happens a few times during the game. Although these issues are not frequent, I had enough of these that it was impactful enough to be of note.
Wait, I did...
The world and audio quality is excellent. From landscape creation, art and lighting are certainly worthy of high praise, as is the sound mix and audio propagation that likely also utilises ray tracing. It allows sounds to occlude, reverb, originate and generally bounce around you, which is a highlight with the correct sound setup. However, many of the aspects of the visual and presentation package do not align with that quality. Cutscenes are rarely more than a face-to-face chat, big epic action sequences have no impact to them and can look quite incomplete, but worst of all, the models, materials and animation are mixed with some last generation levels as opposed to the incredibly lush and full world of Pandora you are thrust within. It did cross my mind often throughout that it all looks and plays very much like a Far Cry game in the Avatar universe, and I could never shake the feeling that was its original pitch. Even when compared to those games, it looks like an improved version of the Dunia engine within them, rather than the Snowdrop cogs that turn underneath this brand new world. And that's it for the deep dive into PC gaming and everything Avatar related. If you like what we do here on IGN, then keep it IGN Performance Reviews, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah!